All right. Well, we have a lot to get through today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Cassie. I am an assistant director in career planning and development here at Webster. So I am one of the ones who meet with students when they request appointments with our office to talk through job search strategies, mock interviews, application material reviews, all sorts of things like that. So today we're going to talk about how to create strong application materials, both resumes and cover letters. And so to get started, we'll define a few things because I know things are different in different parts of the world. So for US style standards, which is what we're going to be talking about today, a resume is that summary of qualifications that you use when you apply for an internship or a job. And it's typically only 1 to 2 pages here in the US. Your resume should communicate your goal of getting hired, but also highlight your education, experience, and skills. Its primary purpose, some people say, oh, a good resume gets you a job. Actually, a good resume just gets you an interview, and then you use that interview to elaborate further on your qualifications. So its purpose is to secure that interview, and they're typically used as a marketing tool for yourself when you're talking through informational interviews or other types of networking as well. So the purpose is to highlight your accomplishments, skills, and experiences, and to clarify your professional identity. It's used as a screening tool for applicants for postings, either internships or job applications. And again, it's used to obtain that interview. Note that a resume is different than a CV in the US. CV stands for curriculum vitae, and some countries will use CV to designate what we would consider to be a resume here in the US. A CV is different in that we use CVs for professionals who are pursuing positions within academia. So if they're applying to a position as a professor or dean of the university, if they have a lot of research experience and they're continuing on in that field under a university's umbrella, someone may use a CV. They also use it when they apply to graduate school or grants or fellowships or things like that. A CV is typically longer than the resume, and it continues to grow as more experience is gained. So it doesn't necessarily have a page limit, but it is primarily only used for applying to grad school or those research positions or working in other areas of academia. So for the purposes of today and most of what you will be using to apply to internships and jobs, you will be using resume standards, and you do not want to go over 2 pages for those resume standards. There are a couple of different strategies that we'll go over today on how to approach your resume. And the first one is be conscientious of your audience. So know who's going to be reading your resume and why. You need to customize. It's very important you customize both your resume and your cover letter content to appeal specifically to each job posting and the readers that will be reading them. So you should ideally have multiple different versions of your resume, one for each job you are applying to, and it's tailored specifically to that intended audience. So when you're kind of thinking about, okay, what should I put on this specific resume? You want to ask yourself what is most relevant to the posting that you're applying to? What is most recent in your recent history or backgrounds? And what is most unique to you? Those are the things you want to be highlighting the most. What is the most important thing you want someone to know about you when they read your resume? What has been some of your most meaningful work, volunteer, or academic experiences? And what are your best strengths or skills to offer? One way to specialize the content of your resume for each job application is to analyze the job description. So you want to review that position and make sure you're noting down the skills, the qualifications, and the key responsibilities that they're asking for in that wish list of that employee that they want to hire. look for patterns, look for repeated information in that job description. So if they say this person will lead a team, we're looking for someone with strong leadership experience, someone who has experience working in a team setting before. They're repeating those key like team and leadership words. So you want to take those words and put them into your resume with context on where and when and how you've been a leader or you worked with a team before. And you want to be specific. You don't want to just relist those skills without any of that context. You want to show, yes, I have this. This is where I used it before. And just to show you a little bit about what employers are looking for from that employer perspective, we've pulled some information from the National Association for Colleges and Employers, their job outlook for 2024. And so when they surveyed employers and they said, okay, you have two people with the same resume, similar skills, abilities, how do you choose between the two? This is how they rank what they're looking for or how they rank what they recognize as important. So they realize not everybody can have this, but they think that having completed an internship within their organization is really high on their list. It means that that person knows the culture of the company. They already have an email address. They already kind of understand how things work there. So they know that's kind of one of the big things. They also know not everyone can do that. So they also look for people who just have experience as an intern in that industry in general. And they know that, that person has relevant experience directly in the industry and it's recent. So those are their top two. But then they also understand not everybody can come in with that internship experience. So what else do they look at? Well, they look at what you studied. So what your major or your program title is. So that's really important to be really clear on what your major program title is. So if it's a Master of Arts or a Master of Science, you want to expel it out completely in the topic of study. And then they also value general work experience. So any prior experience that you've had before with those transferable skills that you can bring in, like leadership, teamwork, communication, employers still value those, even if they're not directly related to the industry you're seeking. Then they value leadership positions, and specifically within those extracurricular activities, maybe on a college campus. So they understand that students who have been leaders in clubs or sports or student government have those skills that they're looking for, even if they don't have general work experience maybe or direct work experience in that industry. So just some things to keep in mind on what influences what an employer is looking for as what you maybe want to include on your resume. You want to make sure that you're highlighting your skills from all of these different areas. So it doesn't have to be just paid work, like those full and part-time jobs, which they can be, but you can also list internships, on-campus student employment, any of those significant involvement in student activities or community organizations. So if you volunteer at your place, at your religious institution, that could be some great skills and experiences you want to explain. Further volunteer positions, any freelance work or personal projects that you've completed, any athletic leadership roles that you've served or teams you've been a part of, any major class projects, papers, performances, things like that, research that you've presented. So Webster offers great opportunities to present research at least 2 times a year here on campus. And so something like that is a great thing to include on your resume. Here is what not to include based on US standards. So US style resumes should not include photos. They should not include too much personal information. So no marital status, government ID numbers, citizenships, things like that. We don't ask for a declaration of honesty, and we recommend not including reference lists or a mention of references. That's typically an outdated practice now. If an employer wants references, they'll have you upload them as a completely separate document from your resume. We also recommend not including just general hobbies or interests, but we can talk about ways to add your extracurriculars in a way that is more professional rather than just saying, I like to play chess and I like to read. Well, are you on the chess team at Webster? That's a better, more professional way to share some of your interests, but also share those extracurriculars where you're working with others and developing those skills necessary. Be sure to seek feedback on your resume. So ask for people to review. You can ask professors who are, who've worked in your industry before for advice. You can upload your resume to Handshake, where it's automatically reviewed by someone from our office within about 3 business days. So that's our Handshake resume review feature. And then we send you back comments on, hey, you need to make some changes, or this is okay, but we recommend, doing some of these things to make it a little bit stronger. You can schedule appointments with us to get direct feedback on a resume in person or virtually. And you can ask those industry experts or employers, specifically regarding those specific areas of content. And your goal is to create a theme throughout your application materials. So connect your resume to other pieces that you used in your application process. Does your cover letter reinforce those key areas of skills and qualifications? How are you going to connect it to your interviewing? So are you able to elaborate more on some of the materials you've included on your resume, some of those experiences? Are you able to talk further during an interview? How will you ensure that the message that you're trying to relay is unified? And so this can include things like cover letter writing, the way you write emails professionally, the way you follow up with thank you notes. All of these things should be clear and consistent and respectful. So when it comes to formatting, you're basically trying to make your resume as easy to read, as easy to skim as quickly as possible, and get the most information out of that skim. Employers typically form their initial impressions within the first 10 seconds of viewing your resume. So you want it to be clear, easy to read, consistently formatted. They will form that impression. It doesn't mean they stop reading after 10 seconds, but it means they say, oh, this is a good resume or this is not a good resume within those 10 seconds. And then they may read another 20 to 50 seconds more, and that may be it. So the layout, the organization of things is really important there. You want them to be able to quickly pick out the information from your different topic areas as easily as possible. So one way to do this is make sure all of your dates line up on the right side. We'll show some samples in a minute. We recommend not using a template because they can be messy. They're really hard to format. They take up space in ways that, waste some space. Some resume review software will have a hard time identifying the formats of a template and may not pull your information out well. And then they just eliminate your ability to change the content the way you want it or style it the way you want it. So we recommend not using a template. We recommend putting things into a Word document. We'll show you some stylistic preferences in a minute, but that's what we recommend there. And the length is another reason why we are recommending that 1 to 2 pages is in case that person doesn't even get to that second page that's reviewing your resume in the 60 seconds. Be okay with whatever you have on the first page being the only thing they see. If you have a second page, that's okay, but they're definitely not going to make it to a third or a fourth page. That's why we recommend limiting it. If you do use a second page, use at least half of that second page to show, yes, you did have to, you did have enough to quantify a second page. If not, there are probably ways to fit everything you need on that first page with some additional formatting. One way to help with this formatting is setting all of your margins. So you can narrow your margins down to 1/2 inch, so that 0.5 to fit more on that one page. We don't recommend going lower than this. because it will cut off when you print, but that 0.5 can be all the way around. Another thing you want to focus on is clear font styles. So the Arial, Times New Roman, Calibri, things like that. And your font size should be fairly small as 10 or as big as 12, and somewhere in the middle there. And it should be consistent throughout. You want your name to be the biggest thing on your resume. Your headings can be slightly bigger than the main font, but the rest should be the same font and the same size throughout. You want to reduce the amount of white space as much as possible, but it shouldn't all be crammed in there and hard to read. So find a balance, fill the spots, use the space you have well. And then you can use certain enhancements. So I'll show you when we get to the samples on how to bring attention to certain parts of your resume that you want to stand out a little bit. Additionally, you want to focus on the order of your information. So each section that you have should list things in that reverse chronological order of whatever is most current or recent to most historical. So all of you with, studying your degrees here at Webster, you should have your Webster degree first because it's current, and then your other education after that in that reverse chronological order. And so we'll talk about some of these key content areas. So every resume should include these key areas. Your contact information, that should be right under your name at the top. It should have an email address and a phone number at the bare minimum, ways for employers to get in contact with you. You can include your city and state if you would like, but we don't recommend including your full mailing address anymore. After contact info, the first thing you should start with is education. This is going to be key to those employers who are looking to see what you're studying and is it relevant to their industry. So they rated that as one of the high things they're looking for, so they want to see that early on. So for your education, you should include the name of the university, its location, so city and state or city and country, your full formal degree title, so Master of Arts in Business Administration or Bachelor of Science in Information Technology, fully spelled out because they want to know what you're studying. And then you don't need a date range for education. They just want to know when you're expected to be done or when you completed it. So the month and year of your expected graduation. So some people will say expected May 2025, or they'll just say May 2025, and employers know that if it's in the future, that's when it's planned to happen. Some optional things to add to an education section include your minor or an area of concentration or emphasis, a list of related coursework, perhaps, if that's relevant to the position you're applying for. Some people will list honors and awards. If your GPA is higher than a 3.0, it could be worth adding, but it's not necessary. And any related experience at a graduate level is typically more valuable to employers than a GPA. So don't worry if your GPA is lower, I would just leave that off. After education, you want to go to experience. And we talked about all the different places that you can pull this experience from. It doesn't have to be paid, but you want to include the title of your position title, the title of the organization where you worked or volunteered or did a project for or something like that, the location, so the city and state or city and country, and the date range. So it should be month and year to month and year. And you can pull these from all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be paid experience, like I said. It could be a study abroad experience, those co-curricular activities, volunteer, class projects, student clubs, all of those types of things as well. And underneath each experience that you list, so if you say, I was the president of the chess club at Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri, from this date to this date, include bullet points on, providing context on what skills and abilities you used while being president of the chess club. You want to start with those strong past tense action verbs and include the bulleted descriptions of what you did, how you did it, and why did it matter. So this is how you do those bulleted task descriptions. They don't have to be too long. It could be 1 to 2 lines. You don't want to use any my, I, me, or my statements. Those are assumed on a resume. It helps summarize things a little bit more quickly if you keep those out. And you want to make sure that you're using both professional and descriptive language. So those strong past tense action verbs, sometimes people will have some and there's ways to strengthen them. So here's a list of some sample strong action verbs. So facilitated, organized, documented, streamlined, implemented. These are really strong. They catch the reader's attention. They can visualize what you're doing when you say these. So these are the types of strong words you want to be using. Make sure that you're including industry relevant keywords that are in that job description. Add any quantifiers when possible. So add numbers. If you can say, you know, as the president of the chess club, I helped lead a team of 15 other students, and we organized such and such, and we hosted a tournament where 25 people attended. Those numbers in there helps quantify what you're doing. So these are some examples of some average bullet points. They're not terrible, they're okay. So someone said publicized events. There's still some information missing. There are ways to strengthen this to better show a picture of what this person did. So on a revise, they changed it to created social media posts, so that's the type, and flyers, another type, to increase attendance, that was their goal, at weekly trivia events. That's the type of event that they help publicize. So it's not much longer, but it includes so much more context on the who, what, when, where, why. They could have also said, you know, resulting in over 50 extra people attending trivia. That's a quantifier there. Or how many social media posts, how many different types of flyers. Those are ways to quantify it. Another basic one is I organize a food drive for disadvantaged families. That's pretty explanatory, but they have an I statement in there. It's taking up space. We don't want that. So how can we, you know, clean this up, add some quantifiers in there? So they changed it to organized and promoted. So they have 2 strong action verbs there, specifically the food drive, resulting in over $1,000 worth of goods for families in need. So they have that quantifier in there, and that is great. Another one is taught art class for children. Well, what kind of art? How old were the kids? How many kids were there? And so taught drawing class to 8-year-olds, so that's an age range, with an emphasis in building composition. So we have the type of class and what emphasis it was. They could also add how many 8-year-olds? Was it 10? Was it 50? That helps quantify things. So those things we've covered, the contact information, the education, and the experience, those are required for your resume. Everything else is optional. If you have it, you can put it on there. If you don't, you can leave it off. So a summary of qualifications is sometimes helpful, or an objective statement, one or the other. These are the only things that we would recommend having above your education. So you have your name and your contact info. If you include a summary or an objective, then that goes next. Then your education goes second. If you would choose not to have one of these, your education's still first. So the summary is a brief summary of your qualifications, skills, or experiences. An objective is a little bit more specific. It tells the reader what your goals are, or expresses your interest in the specific job you're applying for. So this is one of the things that's going to change with each job you apply for. This objective or summary is going to evolve based on the different ones you apply for. So a sample of an objective is to obtain a federal work-study position at Webster University, utilizing organization, interpersonal communication, and leadership skills. Another one is a graduate information technology management student seeking a curricular practical training opportunity, or CPT, to strengthen leadership and technical skills. So they're to the point, but they're also specific. They're not very long. And you don't want to include those I, me, or my statements in this one either. So keep that in mind. There's no I, me, or my in these. Other optional ones are skills. So if you include skills, we recommend only listing out technical, tangible, or language skills. And so I'll show you what those mean. So technical skills are those computer software programs, any computer coding languages that you know, any specific application that you have to download or website that you might have to use to achieve one of your tasks that you're familiar with. Those are those technical skills. Language skills are the languages you speak. But if you want to list out those transferable soft skills like communication, leadership, attention to details, we recommend not including those just in the generic list. We recommend kind of filtering those in with your experience bullet points. So say, practice attention to detail while serving as president of this club, those types of things. Because if you just list them in a list form, it's not providing any context or where and when and how you've used them. So you save the skill list for those technical, tangible skills. Some people will have so many awards and recognitions that they pull them all out and make their own section. That's an option there. Don't forget the dates on those. It won't be a range necessarily, but you'll have the award date, so month and year. And then you may have other extracurriculars or professional associations, clubs you're a part of, memberships to different things, conferences you attended, all of those types of things. So again, include dates wherever possible. And if you have the room on that 1 to 2 pages and you have one of these things, you can include it if it helps further your relatability to the position that you're applying for. So here are some examples of all the things we've talked about. So this person has their name across the top. They have their contact information all succinct here, and it's on one line, so it's taking up a minimum amount of space so they can fit more on there. Their borders are 1/2 inch narrow all the way around. They've started with their education, and then here's how they've used some of that emphasis to help kind of differentiate between different pieces of information. So they've bolded their degree title because they want employers to see that. And then they've italicized the name of the university so that it doesn't get lost in the bold, but it also is a little bit more important in the location. So you don't want to just bold everything or capitalize everything across the board. You want to play around with some of these different ones. So they say, okay, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, emphasis in accounting altogether. Oh, at Webster University. And then the less important things are the location and maybe the date and the GPA, but they're still on there if they're looking for them. If they're just looking through quickly, they go, okay, we're looking for someone with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. Check, next thing down the list. This person has created 2 different experience sections, which you can do because you still want to list each mini section in that reverse chronological order, but this person has direct experience related to accounting. They're probably applying to an accounting position. So they wanted those positions up higher. They wanted the employer to see those first. So they've pulled out accounting experience and made it its own section. You can do the same thing. You can label it whatever you want, or you can just say relevant experience to the postings. They have their job title, the name of the company they worked, the city and state, the date range. Here are those past tense action verb bullet points underneath each one. They have their skills listed out, the ones that are technical and tangible to the job they're applying for. And then they still wanted to include their additional experience because they have those transferable skills from their maybe customer service or on-campus jobs that could still be relevant. And so they've done the same thing here with all the formatting. And then they've listed their organizational involvement down here with dates. This person, again, has their contact info all at the top. They have both of their degrees on here. So their master's degree is first. That's current or most recent. They have their professional experience listed out down here. They have any certifications they've listed. If it were me, I would also recommend including dates over here on the right for their certifications. And then they have their relevant programming languages across the bottom here. So they're saving a great amount of space by listing them out long ways instead of this way. So that is a quick overview of resumes, and most resumes will be paired with a cover letter. And so a cover letter is that one business style letter, that one page that is submitted in tandem with a resume for an internship or job application. Not all postings require it. Some don't have a space for it. That's okay. But if it's optional and they have a space to upload it, we recommend taking the time to write a custom cover letter for each posting you apply for. Because if someone is looking at two resumes that are relatively the same as far as education and experience, but one of them has taken the time to write that custom cover letter and say, hey, this is why I'm interested in working for your company. This is why I would be a great fit for this position. They're probably going to at least give an interview to the person who took the time and energy to write that letter over the similar resume with the person who did not. So we always recommend doing one. And the letter is a great place to introduce yourself to an employer, express your interest in the organization or the specific posting. So take some time to research the posting, the organization. Why do you want to work there? Sometimes it's just to get an internship or a job, but tell them, I've researched your company. I saw you're working on this great project or initiative and you're serving these specific clients. And I'm really passionate about this and I would love to help contribute. Use specific details and examples to show them you know what you're talking about. And then you want to explain your strongest qualifications that are related to that position. So that's you looking through that job posting again. You've already pulled out those keywords to make sure that you've woven them through your resume. So how are you going to explain with specific examples and detail when and where and how you've used those skills before? What are you bringing to the table? And so you kind of want to take a minute to focus on your goals. So what type of job are you looking for? What type of setting are you interested in? What are your values? What's important to you? What kind of experience do you already have? What kind of impact do you want to have? Having answered some of those questions already can help you write a cover letter. It can help you put some of those things into words when you're conveying them over to an employer in a meaningful way. And so some strategies to get started. Again, analyze that job description, note those themes, the key qualifications, the things that they're looking for. What is most relevant based on your experience that you have? What is most meaningful? Create a draft, get some feedback. Again, customize it based on your research that you've done on that industry or that company or that specific position. Personalize it when possible. I'll show you what that means in a minute if you can. Make sure you proofread. Writing out a cover letter is basically one of the tests to say, can you communicate effectively? Can you get a point across in clear communication with all of the right capitalization and, nothing's misspelled or everything's in the correct context? That's like one of the first samples of your work, essentially, that an employer is looking for. So you want it to be proofread really well. Focus on the reader. So sometimes it's hard because you're going to be talking about yourself. Try not to overuse the word I. Try starting sentences without I to diversify your sentence structure. You can still get your point across, but make it a little bit more creative than just I have done this and I've done that and that. And keep with the theme. Make sure you're not bringing up something in your cover letter that doesn't already match what's mentioned on your resume, or maybe something that, you haven't, duplicated on your LinkedIn profile or things like that. So make sure everything's keeping on theme. If your resume objective didn't get changed and it says you're searching for one job, but your cover letter says you're applying to a different job, make sure you're proofreading for all of those things. And so in that way, it should complement your resume. It shouldn't just be rooted in the same information, but you should be elaborating on the samples that you've already provided. And make sure you're speaking professionally. show the employer what you can do for them, why you're passionate about working for them, and use it as a sample of your strong writing skills. So this is all the formatting advice, the business block style letter. I'll show you what this looks like. Should be one page. You can still have your narrow 0.5 margins if you want to fit it all on one page. Let's see here. Make sure that you aren't, speaking negatively at all about past experiences. You want to focus on positive aspects about yourself or your experiences. Don't talk yourself out of the job. So don't say, well, I don't know if I meet all of your qualifications, but I do meet some. Talk strongly and boldly about the qualifications that you do meet when you're writing it out. And then this is the order of information. So I'll show you, I'm going to go through it quickly, and then I'll show you the sample where we can talk more in detail. But first, for a business style letter, you start out with your contact info. I'll show you what that looks like. Then you do the date. And then you do the organization contact info. If you don't have their exact mailing address or the exact name of the person who's going to be reviewing your application, don't worry, put what you can, put what you know. So even if it's Edward Jones, St. Louis, Missouri, if that's all you know, that's all you know. Your greeting example. So if you do know the name of the hiring manager, it's always great to address them specifically. I would try to use their title more than a Miss or a Mr. So dear, first name Lockwood or Director Lockwood. If they have the title there, Dr. Lockwood, don't assume gender if you don't know it. If you don't know their name, that's okay. You can say dear hiring manager or dear search committee if you know the way that they run their committees. The first paragraph is the one you're specializing the most, and it's saying, why are you writing? What are you applying to? Why are you interested in that specific company? So that's where you're doing that company research and weaving those relevant details in there. I'm applying to this position. I'm really passionate about this area of work because. Your middle paragraph, you maybe will edit for each posting just a little bit to make sure you're focusing on explaining your most relevant skills and qualifications and not just listing them out, but providing context on where and how you used them before, maybe things you learned when you used them before. So make every effort to connect these with that job posting and your resume. And then you wrap up. So you say, thanks so much for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. You can reiterate contact information if you want. And then you say sincerely or best with your name. So let's look at this sample because I know it's much easier to visualize when you're looking at a sample. So this person has used the same header as their resume. That's okay. And it's saving a little bit of space. So they have their contact info all across the top. It's nice, clean, succinct. Their name is the biggest thing there. Then they have the date. Then they have the company that they're applying to and the hiring manager name. So it's as if they're putting this letter in the mail. So it'd be Dr. Julie Jones at this research center. This is the address, city, state. Again, you're not actually putting this in the mail. So it's okay if all you knew was Jones Research Center, University City, Missouri. You should be able to find some of that with Google, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So put what you can, put what you know. So they've used Julie's title here, which is great, Dear Dr. James. If they didn't know Julie's name, they could say Dear Hiring Manager or Dear Search Committee. And then their first paragraph here is, I'm excited about applying to the research assistant for this specific study, and then why they're interested in that. So, they're saying, okay, we have a mutual connection here. This is how I found out about this position. I read some of your journal articles. I was fascinated by your research, specifically on this topic. And I think that I would be a really strong person to help you out in this role. Then their middle paragraph or paragraph, you can have a couple as long as it fits on one page. They're saying, okay, this is the relevant experience I have that you're looking for based on that job posting. So I've already done, I've already written papers and conducted literature reviews. I've served in these positions before. I've focused on adolescent risk-taking behavior. I administered questionnaires, debrief subjects, use SPSS. So they're kind of summarizing all the things they've done. And what did I take away from this? I gained an understanding of the research process, and I think that I was really well prepared for this. And then they wrap up really succinctly, thanks so much. I think I'm really well aligned for this role. Please contact me if you'd like to do an interview. And then they sign off. Um, so I know we just went over a lot as far as resumes and cover letters go. So what questions do people have? Feel free to unmute or ask in the chat. And if nobody has any questions, that's okay. You can always make individual appointments with our office where we can walk through, we can, review your cover letter and your resume and provide you direct feedback. As I said before, if you upload a resume to Handshake, it will automatically get approved. That's only for resumes, but that's okay. And you can, if some of those comments or reviews don't make much sense, you can always make an appointment with us to talk through them or talk through a cover letter for a specific job posting, that kind of thing. And we have all sorts of resources on our connections page where you can learn more about formatting both resumes and cover letters. All right. Well, thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.